Hello and welcome to this edition of the Mary Myatt and Co videos on curriculum. I am joined by Kiran Satti, who I've had the pleasure to know for a little while now. We've interacted many times. And one of the things that I know is that she's an absolute expert when it comes to picture books, particularly diverse picture books, and her enthusiasm for reading, particularly picture books, is just inspirational. She has been in the primary sector for 14 years, a senior leader, and she is absolutely an expert. So I'm really, really honored to be here with you today. But I'd give you a chance to introduce yourself. Who are you? Tell us about yourself.
Thank you so much for inviting me on, Penny. Yeah, so you've said I'm definitely primary through and through, leading English reading. Um, at the core of all of it is that I'm very passionate about literacy being an enabler to ensure equitable access to the curriculum. And I think reading for me, teaching children or any person to read is the greatest gift you can give another human being. So I'm very, very passionate about ensuring that any child that walks into a school that I'm part of or wherever it is, they know the value of themselves through reading, because I think it's one of those magic things that once the child understands that they're a reader, they fly. So I can't think of a better thing really in education.
It's such a lovely way of thinking about it. I am whenever I talk to you about it, I'm always filled with how much you believe in the power of particularly picture books. But for our listeners and watchers, can you define a picture book for us before we even go into the
Yes.
rest of the
So
conversation?
I'll name a few people as well through this because my love of picture books has always been there, but I think my understanding of it has developed very much through the connections that I've made through X now, isn't it? So Matt Tobin was, I suppose, the best sort of teacher for me in terms of really understanding the power of picture books. I think the beauty I've always understood. So when we're talking about a picture book, it's when words and pictures interplay with each other to create more meaning. So you can't just have the text by itself. You'd need to have the images. You can't just have the images. You need to have the text. And together they make meaning in the story. And I know we're going to talk about it a bit, but Rosie's Walk, and this is based on this book as well. Now, if you really want to get into picture books and really understand them, Margaret Meek's text is essential. And she goes into depth about this. Seems a very simple picture book because there's a lot of earlier settings that have it, but it's such a sophisticated picture book. So
Mm.
Rosie's Walk is an excellent example of what it means to have a picture book where the words and the pictures interplay with each other. And it it enables any child, it doesn't really matter what level they're at, because you can see like there's different things happening within that. So chickens going around the pond, but you've got this fox that's chasing her throughout it, but she hasn't got a clue. And so there's lots of humor in there. There's lots of hidden meaning in there as well, sort of inside jokes. So it's a really good example of what a picture book is and the magic of what it can enable a child to understand from reading.
Yeah. And I love that idea of the interplay between words and image. And certainly, I am a parent of toddlers. I'm really engaging in this world at the moment, and I'm struck by how much there is to love about picture books. As an adult, and I'm learning this joy to be found in both the illustration and the text. So you talked a little bit about, your influences, the text that you showed up there, which will show up in our references. But what brought you to love picture books? Where did that come from for you?
Um, I've always loved books anyway, and I had lots of pop-up books when I was little, and that always stuck with me because it was just immersive. But I think coming into teaching and on my practices, and even in different countries as well, like in Tanzania especially, I brought picture books with me, and it was like a gateway into another world for children, but in a way that wasn't dependent on where they were in terms of their reading skill. And when you think about reading, so I'm very much about reading for pleasure being something that's pedagogical. It's not a tick list thing. And picture books is an enabler for that because it's inclusive. It doesn't matter sort of who you are, what skill you have, because you're opening up pages and it's for you. It's giving that child or that reader ownership of what they want to see or what they need to take from it, their response to the text, and there's no wrong answer with it. And I think that's an important message to give to children in the sense that when you're reading something, it's how you respond to it because it's a human connection you're having with the text. So I think it, for me, it was that gateway. You're enabling children or learners to go into another world because sometimes having text and it is just sort of like words, it can be intimidating, it can be off-putting. Reading stamina does come into it, but I think something like a picture book is it's a great enabler because you're scaffolding how they infer, making meaning from the text, and it's infinite in terms of the responses that you could give something like that as well. And what I absolutely love is, I mean, I've taught year two for quite a few years now, and so some of the picture books I'd use each year, obviously a little bit different, but I absolutely would say every class finds something new each year, or the child sees something a bit different, and that actually adds to my meaning of the text and my teaching of the text. So the next time I teach it, I'll say, you know, so and so last year saw this. What do you see? But it's endless possibility. I think that's what I loved about picture books, that there was that confidence that when you hand a book to a child, there wasn't going to be that pressure as such that I need to be able to read this book and understand it. That wasn't there. It was very much like this is a world that you're invited to see what you find. And actually, but from my experience, it's enabled that will to come as well because you need skill and will. You need reader volition, and I think picture books is a great way to enable reader volition because yeah, there's no judgment with it. There's no right or wrong. And it is very much about what they see and what they want to talk about as well,
Yeah,
which
I love that idea. Sorry, I
no,
was just struck by
it's
the skill and the will. I've heard that working on several literacy programs, and the idea that a book is a gateway into all sorts of meanings and interpretations. I can literally see it with some of the youngest children when they're looking at a picture book and they're seeing something completely different. It sounds like you really do believe that they're important as a process, but also as an experience for young children.
absolutely. I think, I mean, you know very well how much I'm invested in DEI as well.
Mm.
And the range of books out now that are very high quality as well. You could have enough picture books to look at all the protected characteristics that are there at the moment. And they're done in a way, they're done really, really well because again, it's that opening up that conversation about certain things. I know we're going to touch on social issues and things like later, but that again, I think it's a safe space as well. A
Yeah.
picture book is a safe space for children to understand or to explore, to engage in things that they're not necessarily going to have experience of. So like one of my absolute favourite books is The Journey by Francesca Sana. And I mean it's beautiful but depressing in the sense that it's still relevant now. So it's based on a family who have to move, they become refugees because of war. But the way that the story is written is actually quite simple, but the images that go with the text really open up that conversation and open up that experience that these families are having.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, enables empathy, not necessarily, not deep empathy, but it's that lived experience that you're sharing with children in a way that, I think they're the best of us. I think children will always be the best of us, to be honest. And I think the way that they interpret picture books, especially those that have, very deep social issues that are sometimes difficult for adults to talk about. I think there's it's a freeing way, it's a safe way for them to explore something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Such I'm obviously I'm a big advocate of diverse books for children, but yeah, you can deal with some really big issues with the simplicity of word and image. And there are some great examples out there. I know you're going to share some with us, and you talked about Rosie's Walk already. Um, and Leaf, you we're going to talk about Leaf. You were passionate about it. Have you got it in your pile?
yeah, I love this one. So this one's by Sandra Diteman, and there's lots of ways that you can use this book. You can look at it in terms of prejudice. So it's a polar bear, and he gets
Yeah.
judged by the animals because he's different. And it's the way that the conversations are sort of plotted out on a page as well. You can use it for debates. You can use it in terms of global awareness. You can use it in terms of the environment. There's just, and I think that's the other thing with picture books. Like there are so many different ways that you can enable children to engage with them. Every time I have read this, it doesn't matter what year group or a group should, it's always got a round of applause.
Mm.
This was always had a round of applause, and I completely understand why. And I mean, just the way that the illustrations are as well.
Yeah, that
They
is
are they're
beautiful.
stunning. This isn't doing it justice, but it's that magic where children then will want to go in a little bit further into the book and sort of like really dig into the images. And there's lots of things that I've now managed to see because children have seen it first, and it's, oh, have you not seen this, miss? They're exciting. These books, they spark excitement with children as well. Yeah, and that I feel has is the gateway then to move into other texts as well. So going back to Francesca Sanna, I always use that with the journey with Welcome to Nowhere by Elizabeth Laird because it's about refugees and it's about that experience. But having that knowledge of a picture book that can relate to just a book, a novel, again, is another gateway into more vocabulary, into more of the world of literature, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big favourite, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of beautiful books, whether they're for adults or for children. And I've just been struck by just the quality of illustration that comes up. It's art, it's so artistic. And you look at children's eyes kind of light up. If I had to push you and to introduce your favorite diverse book, how would you cope with that?
No, not very well. There's too many. I think this one, I mean, I don't know about you, Benny. I've always had people sort of pronounce my name incorrectly for no fault of their own. It's just it's awareness, I suppose. But Your Name is a Song comes to mind. And it's just beautiful the way that it's written, and done in a way where it's fun and it's, empowering. So the little girl is empowered as to teach others how to say her name because it's not a name that's, been used before or has been heard before. Um, but it's really hard. It's really hard. I mean, that's one. I think, yeah, The Journey by Francesca Sanna,
Yeah.
that is another one. Solvay. So this one is, I mean, there's a link to Black Panther as well. So
Yeah.
anything
Yeah.
related to that. So that's by Lupita Nyong'o, who
Yeah.
the actress, and this is based on colorism. So it's not even about racism as such; it's about colorism within a culture. And within South Asian communities, Black communities, that's something that I don't think gets spoken enough about. And this it's done in such a beautiful way, and she's done it through like a fairy tale within the story as well, because Solvay needs that story being told to her about how beautiful your skin is, regardless of the colour. But what this one has always evoked an emotional response, and I think any good book should evoke that sort of response from you because we're human at the end of the day, and I think picture books are just they're a great enabler sometimes to just feel human.
Yeah.
And I think it's always been, and you can get this one on YouTube as well. It's always been this page where she's trying to rub her skin off and she's trying to eat light coloured food, and that's always got a response, regardless of age, because she's hurting herself, and it's I think, like you said before, they seem simple, but actually they really touch on deep issues and really important issues as well. That I think sometimes it's easier to do it through a picture book because, yeah, I keep going back to that word gateway, but it's a way to open up these conversations. And there's books I know that you probably have come across, like The Hate That You Give and things like that, which would link to this. And if you're going on like a spectrum of ages and things. But that one it's a very, very special book actually, and it's a very brave book to have written because it's so vulnerable.
Absolutely. I um I had an emotional reaction, just, kind of reminding myself of that page. I've got that book on my shelf and remember being as an adult, very shocked by that act of kind of scrubbing your skin, but recognizing that actually that is in the consciousness of children who have darker skin. Um, some of them anyway, and that colorism doesn't get spoken about very much. We're only really starting to grapple with it. I know it's really hard to choose, but you've got some great examples there. And I'm also feeling a little bit jealous, I think, because when I was younger, we didn't really have, we had picture books. I think I remember, Roger Red Hat and Billy Blue Hat and Jennifer Yellow Hat. They were the readers, they weren't particularly diverse. Um, Children these days have access to diverse books. So what's changed?
I think the big thing that I can think of is the CLPE research that was published. It was 2017, their first Reflecting Realities report. And I think that really put the idea of diverse books and the need for them, the actual need for them, in the spotlight. And ever since then, they've been doing reports, and gradually diversity has improved and increased. But I just think we're more aware of it now, and I think it's our communities are very intersectional, and that's going to become more. That's not going to change. And I think there's a lot more awareness of it. And I think the younger generation actually are a lot more aware than we give them credit for. And it's not, I'm not just talking about diversity in the sense of race and culture, but in terms of the types of families, in terms of lived experiences as well. So Milo Imagines the World is another one that I can't find it, but that one's a really brave story as well. And I think I've always been careful as to which year groups to use it. But if I know that there are families that have got social issues where it does concern prison or something like that, I do get that book out, because actually it's another way for that child to be seen and to be feel that they're understood in some way and not be judged. And I think there's lots of things now, about intergenerational trauma and things like that. I just think we're a lot more aware of all of these things. And so it's only right by the children and, well, for society, that we have these books that reflect actual reality. Darren Chetty had written Beyond the Secret Garden. It's an article that I keep going back to, and he talks about closing the imagination gap, because for a long time you have stories that were reflective of our reality, not necessarily of everyone's, and it tended to be sort of white middle class. You have them like Peter Pan, the Darling Family, the Secret Garden, and so that imagination gap would be closed, because that's all you're giving to children. I think the other thing about these diverse books is that it's enabling you to, not have that as an issue. But also it's for everyone. It's for, those white working class children, those white British children, those black families, those immigrant families, that they see each other in stories as well. One thing that I did, I think 5, 6 years ago, we had a flux of immigrants coming in, and it was important that I made sure that there were books in that classroom and in that school that reflected who they were and the experiences that they had, not just necessarily for those families coming in, but for the children that were there as well, because it was the unknown. It was, and but we know about human behaviour. Most of the time it's out of fear if there's ever something that is negative. And I think it was sort of seeing that and mitigating it and making sure that there are books, and or searching for these books as well. I think you have to be proactive about it and get to know your class or your school as well. Because there's not ever going to be a perfect collection of picture books. It's dependent on the children that you're serving wherever you are, and it's got to be reflective of those realities. It's not just a fad, or I've seen this on Twitter and everyone's saying this is an amazing book. Great. And yeah, if there's a reason for it and there's a purpose, yeah, obviously bring it in. But it's really important that you base your book choices on the children and the community that you have in front of you.
I
Otherwise,
just
there's no point.
fascinating by how many possibilities there are for world building within the classroom.
Yeah.
And when we think about world building, that kind of the not the one size fits all picture book choice, really thinking about who's in the room. And you talked a little bit about, the benefits for young people. I love this idea of closing the imagination gap. The reference you gave there was Darren Chetty and his article. There's a sparking of imagination, there's exploring that happens. Have you seen that in your classrooms?
Yeah, every time. And I think one of my favorite memories is when I gave year six children, you know, the big, massive picture books that you can get that are always in the early years classrooms. And we made the decision to move some of them into the school library. And the years I've never seen them so excited about books. They were sprawled out on the floor because they were just wanting to get into these books. They were sharing them, they were reading them aloud to each other. They were like, "Do you remember this book?" And I think that for me is the reason why they're amazing because they're ageless and it does it's not about age, it's about that when you give a child a book, it's them sort of finding out who they are, what they believe, what they see, and exploring the world. I think one of my favorite authors for doing that, Abby Elphinstone. That's who I wanted to say. If ever you see her YouTube videos or just her talking about books, she completely epitomizes what it is that you're giving children. And you know, the way that she talks about how she actually writes her stories, it always starts with pictures or a map or something. And so, you know, you think about neurodivergent children, things like that. It's, you know, it's all encompassing, it's all inclusive. Um, and that's my favorite thing about picture books, that
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what year group they're in, and the older that they get, actually, I think they need the magic even more.
Well, I was
Um,
going to say, because one of the things that I've been exploring with the Oxford University, Open University's Reading for Pleasure program is this, picture books not just for young children. The idea of meaning between and the interplay between word and image is something that we can bring up into upper key stage two, lower key stage three. There are key stage four children um, who have that entitlement as well to explore. So, I think I strongly believe that picture books can be used throughout the educational experience. Um,
Absolutely.
I think it's time to introduce a second picture book. If you could hold it up for us, so that we can still see you and still see the picture book. What are you bringing to the table now as
Well,
one of your recommended reads?
Erica's story I've just thought of now as you were saying that. So this I wouldn't use in Key Stage 1 or early years or lower key. I'd use in Upper Key Stage 2. So it's World War II related. Um, and again, so there is text,
Mhm.
but even that is interesting how it's written. The images are fantastic as well. I don't want to give this one away too much. If people haven't seen this or know of it, I highly recommend it. Even just as if you wanted to do sort of like sort of nurture conversations or social emotional conversations. This one sort of tackles lots of things. So prejudice, immigration, having to move, the feeling of fear, being all encompassing, injustice. But then it's such a hopeful story at the end. I don't want to give it away.
Okay.
There's an image at the start and then there's an image at the end. And if you
Yeah.
were to put them side by side, it would tell you about that child's journey and that person's life story. But it goes back to that point that picture books are important for all year groups, and there are picture books out there, and I think you have to be proactive in sort of finding them out as well. That will enable you to sort of. I think the purpose of education is to understand how to be better humans. I've always thought that. And I think something like this story invites children to really think about that. Like, how can I be a better human based on Erica's story that she shared? And as humans, we connect. That's how we connect as humans, through story. Like our brains are wired
Mm.
through story. Um, so this for me is it's a must. I think not if you're doing World War II, just anyway. It's a good book to have in the classroom. Um, yeah, to understand what it means to be human. I think that at the end of it is what all of this is about, really.
I'm glad you didn't give it away because I haven't actually read that one. But on your recommendation, I shall pick it up and hopefully not be too emotionally
I'm going to
overwhelmed.
warn you. Yeah, it is, but it's so worth it. Such a
Yeah.
clever book.
And I was looking at some research on empathy and this idea of kind of engaging with first person narratives, and then not seeing people as homogenous groups, being able to see somebody as an individual through their story, through their first person narrative. And even the title is Erica's story, it belongs to her.
Mhm.
Um, And I think for me, I think children stepping into that space is powerful in terms of emotional development. And the other thing you talked about, which triggered a thought in me, is this idea of, when you have social and emotional issues, um, and you want to really kind of work with children, it's not just about having a conversation, it's about showing them a different world or
Mhm.
somebody else's experience of it. I often talk about it as books as pharmacy. What's the ailment? How can we
Mhm.
diagnose the ailment? How can we start to find the cure through a book? So I hear that and it really
Mhm.
resonates with me.
Yeah, I think it
Oh,
and helps developing relationships as well with the children that you have in your class. I've always been a believer that, whatever class of children you have, you're meant to have them for some reason. It's not just to teach them as such, like the curriculum. There's always a reason. And I think throughout my career, you can still think of those children that I gave them that book because actually they needed it at that time. There's been bereavement, COVID, that was a massive shift in lots of people's lives. And I think it's really important that I've always used books as a way to not only develop relationships with the class that I have, but for each other, for them as well. In primary, and I will remind classes of this, that you are with each other for 5, 6, 7 years. You need to learn how to get on because there will be friendship issues and things like that. And so I've always used books as a vehicle to nurture that understanding that there is differences in our class, but you need to learn how to manage those differences and how you respond to them because in the big wide world, there's going to be more people that you're going to have to manage how to deal with and navigate. And I think that's such a privilege as well that you are there in that point in time with that group of children to help them gel in some way. And they're always good for like dialogic talk and getting each other to listen. And when we're talking about debating and things like that, it's that nurturing of respect for each other, that self awareness as well. I mean, one of the books as well that we know how strong I feel about gender equality and equity. Strong is the New Pretty has always been one book that I will have in a classroom or in a school because it's giving the awareness to the girls, but the boys more so that it's not just about images and things like that. It's about seeing girls as human beings, as equal in if it be sport, if it be in different subjects and things like that. Um, so they're really good to engage children to engage with each other as humans and to be aware of the differences. And Wonder has always been a really good book for that as well because you've got a child who's completely different.
mm,
And then there's another book called You're Amazing, which is about a child with a visible disability. And so it's that, and there's then another book called What's Happened to You, and that's about a child with a visible disability. And it's that questioning of like, well, how do we question? Because that's curiosity, that's all it is. And it's how you then perceive that curiosity or how you respond to it. So I just think books are really good ways to model it or to at least open that conversation. Or if, someone has felt that they've been, mistreated by the way that something has been communicated to them, then there are enough books now. But I go back to the point you need to know the children or the communities that you're serving in order to know which books are going to be the best ones. And there
yeah.
are so many of them.
Yeah. I'm listening and I'm kind of thinking, gosh, as a teacher, former teacher now, would I have known how to deliver the complexity that surrounds a picture book? Are there particular techniques that you think, actually, no, somebody who is working at this level with these books, is there something that they need to know in order to facilitate the brilliance of these books?
So I'm going to go back to Matt Tobin again because I learned it from him. So picture book codes, um, they were a game changer for me when I learned about them because I go back to the idea it is part of a pedagogy as well. And when you're looking at picture book codes, it's looking at the visuals, it's looking about where the text is, it's looking about the framing, the different types of colours, the positioning of characters, the sizing of characters, viewpoint. So Night Lights is a really fantastic book for that, and I've always loved using that one because the positioning of the characters. So you have sometimes where Morphe is high up and the girl is low down, and so there's that power dynamic that you can talk about there. Where there's like sort of viewpoints where you're seeing the characters face completely, so you know it's them, it's their viewpoint that you're seeing. If it's third person, first person, so picture book codes, I would definitely recommend learning about because that enables you to tap into the meaning of the images, which then helps you to get more from the text as well. Yes, well, I definitely recommend. But there's loads of, I mean, go. So Margaret Mead's High Text Teach What Readers Learn is, I think, essential if you want to know more about picture books. Looking at pictures in picture books with Jane Doonan, another really, really good book as well. And they're quite, they're nice. They're not easy. I absolutely love this one, Learning to Read by Margaret Meek again. So this one's hard to get, but if you can get this one, um, because it goes back to that human aspect of what it means to be reading.
Yeah.
So is Molly Bang's Picture This as well, which is a really good one. Oh, everything's going to fall down now. This one is
I do
fantastic.
love the fact that you're just pulling things off the shelf,
Just
and
look at that because you can see them.
you might have to remind us what you were saying while you were turning around.
So picture this, How Pictures Work by Molly Bang. This is an excellent one as well. And there's a story called Little Red, which is like a take on Little Red Riding Hood. And I'll put all the authors and everything down for you, Benny. But that one is excellent in terms of having it alongside this because it tells you, and this, I mean, you can tell it's Little Red Riding Hood in the forest, can't you? But
Yeah,
how simple are those shapes? So this is a really clever one. So if you want to understand picture books a bit more and like how they're coded and things, that's a really good one.
that's brilliant. That's a brilliant recommendation. I'm conscious of time, so I want to move on in terms of our questions because there's still some of the concerns I think that people have that picture books have become almost too adult for younger readers because they are dealing with kind of social issues and DEI and racism and that kind of thing. Is it too early, to introduce those ideas via picture books to younger readers?
I think it goes back down to sort of understanding the children, the community that are in front of you, knowing what will work with them as well. Because there are some picture books that I would use with a year two class, but I wouldn't use for other year two classes. Um, so I think like one thing that we need to like make sure flourishes, I think, is that teacher autonomy as well. Like the children that you're serving. But there's lots of sources of information now. CLPE is a great one. Books for Topics is a great one. There's lots of DEI lists out there. So I think it's knowing your children, but also knowing the books as well. You can't just go on what other people are saying. It has to be, is this right for the children in my class or the adults in my school as well? And I think it's also making sure that the other teachers are confident and comfortable to be sharing these stories as well. Have you got time and space within that term to discuss these books and actually as a team discuss which ones would be best for the children or the school community? But I
That's
don't think it's ever it's based on who you have in that point in time, really. And I think it's about nurturing respect more than anything. And I think the most respectful thing you can do is be brave enough with whoever it is that you're serving to have these conversations because I think you're doing a disservice otherwise. They're growing up in a world that they are meant to be part of. And I think it is a privilege, but also one of the responsibilities of us as educators is to enable them to understand that world in a safe way. And if you've got all of these tools in the sense of books, why wouldn't you use them? And there's no excuse because there are so many of them now. There are so many, and it's up to you which ones would work best for the children that you have in that point in time.
Yeah, yeah. And you have such a clear view on this, and one that I have a lot of respect for, of course. And I have seen, a shift in children's understanding of families and what it means to be of a different race and it just grow over the years and children having conversations about it and that's really enriching I think for them. And some of the examples that you've given, not just in this for this question, but some of the other ones, they cover so much ground. And just to go back to that Reflecting Realities report by CLPE, I've read, all of the reports since 2017, and you've seen that shift in publishing, and there is a bravery now, I think, of texts that are coming out. I'm minded to think of Andrew Moffat's No Outsiders campaign and the books that he chooses. It's Spots and the Dots.
Hmm.
It was just a really popular one, which reminds me of The Smeds and the Smooths by
Hmm.
Julia Donaldson. So kind of dealing with difficult issues by kind of almost simplifying the concepts. And I am also going to point out that CLPE, I think, for a few years ago, pointed out that there were more characters in books that were purple and orange than there were, with actual kind of real brown skin
Yeah.
tone, which really struck me as kind of an insane thing to kind of chart. But we are seeing a shift there.
Mm.
Um, oh, I think it might be time for you to share one more favorite story. If you could hold it up so we can see you and it again. What are you choosing this time for us? What makes it special?
Well, I did say mixed was in that as well, but I can't find mixed. I love mixed, but I think that's the picture that I've sent you, isn't it, with that book?
Okay.
Um, Little Echo.
Wow.
Absolutely, I just think this is just such a beautiful, beautiful story.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and there's like a peekaboo thing as well. So like, it's a really lovely story to share with any year, and I share this with many year groups. But I'll start reading a bit of it, and I'm not going to tell you everything. Little
Okay.
Echo was a very shy echo. She spent her days hiding and sneaking and searching for sounds. So take that image as you want, because you could see it as a metaphor.
Wow.
She's a very shy echo, but then she has to help a little boy who gets stuck because he's looking for treasure. And then at the end of the story, they both find the treasure. But I don't want to tell you too much because this is it's such a beautiful, beautiful book. And it
Yeah.
takes you up, down, around, around. And the images are really cleverly thought out, I believe. But it's one of those stories that you then sort of stop and really think about. But I absolutely adore this story because it can look at self-confidence. It looks at you using your voice. When is it right to use your voice? When shouldn't you use your voice? To be brave when you're using your voice. And what is treasure in this world? So
Yeah.
it's just a beautiful book. Anne Thompson was the one who recommended this for me. A library lady, at a library lady. Please follow her because she's amazing. But that's the thing, the beauty as well, that I've had so many books recommended to me that people just know that you're going to love. So The Old Man, I know I didn't say this is what I mean. The Old Man is one of my absolute favorite picture books.
Yeah.
Um, and it's because it was recommended to me. They're like, you're going to like this one. And you took it up. I was like, oh my God, I really do. Because it's about everything I believe in terms of how to be a good human. And I think that is a joy with books like this, that when you read them, you see them, and you know someone. And there's not a better gift than that when you have children in your class and you know that they're going to like that book. Or if there's a day where they're not feeling too great, just pass them the book. It will make them feel better. And there's that comfort in it as well. And I think it's just, for me, it's a really beautiful, beautiful story because it does everything that I think a good picture book does.
Yeah. And there's a reference there, obviously I'm thinking about Greek mythology and echoes, but also the elements of kind of guiding somebody, and just the vibrancy of the colors that come out as well, the dark contrasted with those sparks of light. Um, and I don't think we can underestimate the power of the illustrator in creating these picture books. So I'm very lucky to have spoken to some writers and illustrators recently, um, and I was recommending recommending picture books as part of an online webinar and realized that actually some of my most powerful books I've seen have got very spare imagery. So I was looking at Sean Tan's The Red Tree, which is just devastatingly spare in many ways. Sean Tan, who wrote The Arrival, and illustrated and all of that. And it starts off so bare on the page, and yet by the end you have this glorious explosion, and the symbolism and the thought that goes into it. I can't even imagine what that's like as a process. But all of the books you've shared have been so beautifully illustrated, and what I think probably you won't be able to choose, but to you, in terms of the picture book, what is more important? What would you pick as the major draw for you? Is it the text or is it the images?
It is more so the image, but I think then the text I will go to sort of see what else the text is trying to tell me about the image. Um, but one thing I haven't spoken about is end papers as well in a picture book, and those are just images. And they tend to tell you a bit about the story before you even read it. So mixed, which I can't find. At the start, the end papers, it's just the primary colours. You can like talk about mixing colours and they go into secondary colours. It's great for art, but it's also good for like race and prejudice and all of those things as well to discuss. And then at the end papers, it's all the secondary colours, but there's lots of other tones of secondary colours as well. And then the follow up to that was Remix, where it goes into sort of different families and different friendship groups and things like that. So I think images more so, but the text is really important as well. But it's that interplay because I think you get so much out of a picture book because of the fact that it's the text and the image working together. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and I was reading a text the other day, a picture book the other day about a young boy who goes to a circus, and I was struck by how immersive the design was. The
That
font
Leon
was
and the Place Between.
Leon and the Place Between. I couldn't remember the title. And I mean, it's a stunningly
Yeah,
created book. It's the richness of it. But the font was also part of the story,
yeah,
as well as the cutouts,
yeah.
what almost going into the magic box and coming back out and going into the place between. And I think it's the physicality of that book experience that really draws me in, that it's not
Hmm.
just about the words and pictures. There's other things going on, like you said, with the end papers.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's another one that recently really attracted me.
Yeah, that's a
You've
great
read
one.
it,
Yeah, I've used it with you too.
have you?
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's the language in it is phenomenal as well, and I think it's that inclusivity of a picture book that there are images there to help the children understand what some of these words are and some of the words that aren't necessarily easily understood. It's a gateway into new vocabulary anyway. So I think again, it's how you use it as a teacher, as an educator, but there's just so much potential and possibility with picture books. And they're not just for younger children. I think they're for everyone. I really do.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear that. And for me, like I said earlier, I don't think picture books are just for little children. Your year twos will appreciate it, your year sixes will appreciate it, but I've seen, year nines appreciate it, year 10 appreciate it. And there are more picture books for older readers now. And some of those ones, the really kind of allegorical or metaphorical ones, like the ones by Sean Tan, you can
Mm-hmm.
really use as debate. You talk about that
Mm-hmm.
dialogic aspect of it. We've gone through a lot of books today, and to be honest, I feel like you're a picture book encyclopedia slash library personified into a human. There's almost like every title that you know. Is there any book that you think I haven't spoken about, but I really want to mention? I love the fact that you're rummaging through the
Yeah,
piles.
well, yeah. I'm just going to recommend this one to you as well if you haven't
So
heard
yeah,
it by Nicola Davis. And anything by this or Nicola Davis is worth having
yeah.
in
Why is
on a
it
bookshelf.
special? Right? Tell us why it's
That
special.
one is the language in this story is stunning. It's absolutely gorgeous. And the way that she uses the language, it just adds to. So like there's one line that I absolutely love in it, and it talks about the wings of the birds. I don't want to give too much away, but it's
No, I
what's
know.
so it's about a brother, and he has a little baby sister, and the little baby sister is deaf; she can't hear.
Yeah,
Um, but it's his journey about how he responds to that. And it's again the way that the colours are used in this story. It's just absolutely stunning. And there's the metaphor of the swifts and the metaphors in terms of the light and the dark, and it's his lived experience of living with a sibling who has a disability because he you see and it's raw in places as well, and it's not afraid to deal with those really dark feelings about what someone might feel having a sibling who had so it's just
perfect.
yeah it's just it's absolutely it's a stunning story.
See that. The
Yeah,
image, the front cover. The wealth of recommendations in this session is just overwhelming. I want to go and dig them all out, rediscover some of them and then, read those first ones for the first time on your recommendation. Thank you so much for the conversation today. I think, the richness of your experience really comes through when it comes to picture books and the cross between the practical but also the passionate. For me, that's really, really stood out. And I hope that our watchers and listeners are able to go out there and get those books into their classrooms and have that experience with their young people as well. So that is a massive thank you for me. Thank you for being with us,
no,
and
thank you, I really enjoyed it, thank you.
welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.